Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In lecture 14, we will talk about municipal solid waste plan preparation. This is the second part of the lecture. The different concepts that we will cover around municipal solid waste management plan preparation for urban local bodies. We will talk about the 7-step approach recommended by CPHEO. We will conduct gap analysis, baseline estimation, infrastructure and service characteristics determination, baseline financial information, and finally preparation of draft municipal solid waste management plan. So the 7-step approach given by CPHEO, it's given over here. So you can see the first 3 steps over here. But overall, we can say that we have already learned the approach for service planning and design process. So when we plan for services, municipal solid waste management is also one of those services. So more or less, both of them are similar. We can say that municipal solid waste management is aligned with the service planning and design process that we have learned earlier. But there are some specific steps which are also which has to be conducted because it's municipal solid waste and not some other service, right? So that is what we will stress on. So the 7-step approach provided by CPHEO starts with step 1, which talks about policies, programs, and legal frameworks. Step 2 is assessment of the current situation and gap analysis, which is similar to what we have learned earlier. And step 3 is stakeholder consultation for municipal solid waste planning. And after that comes the draft plan preparation and then implementation plan, then stakeholder consultation, and all these things are also part of that. So we will talk about that later. But first, let us talk about the step 1, which is to understand what are the policies, programs, and legal frameworks which influences the preparation of municipal solid waste management plans. So first of all, we have to ensure that municipal plan is developed as per all the relevant rules and policies or policy frameworks that has been developed in our country. For example, we have already learned about software management rules, solid waste management rules 2016, national urban sanitation policy, the state policy, and also the municipal different municipal acts and the bylaws that has been formed. So this is all what we have to follow, and not only that, we have to understand that what are the goals of that ULB. So we have already learnt about the general we have talked about the general guidelines that has to be followed for plan preparation, but every ULB can have some specific guidelines that has to be followed. And we have to look into the roles of different authorities. So we have also seen in the municipal solid waste management rules for 2016, it specifically gives us the roles of different authorities, and that we have discussed in earlier lectures. So those roles each one of those roles has to be looked into, and then we have to determine how it has to be implemented and what are the institutions and stakeholders which are involved in the municipal solid waste management plan. Now, once the rules and all these things are studied and the responsibilities are studied, we should also see that the plan that we prepare should be aligned with the regional and district level plan. So we may have a regional and a district level plan for solid waste management in an urban area or in an overall larger area, and usually my plan should be a part of this overall regional or a district level plan. So why we do that? Sometimes, as we have discussed earlier, because of economies of scale, sometimes it's difficult to provide a lot of facilities and infrastructure or even a service for a small local body. Instead, if there are multiple local bodies in near proximity, we can combine these services for this local body. But of course, to do that, you need to have certain considerations. That means in terms of the institutions and stakeholders involved, because there are 2 urban areas, how we are going to manage it, all these things needs to be determined. So we can think of regional municipal solid waste management facilities, and when we have this kind of facilities, both run by private or government organizations, we have to also think about the organizational structure, how this would be administered, because these are regional facilities shared by multiple ULBs. So, solid waste management cell in the state urban development department or within the directorate or commissionerate of municipal administration, they are the ones who determine the clustering policy. That means which ULB should be taken together. They also determine what would be the governance structure of the facilities or infrastructure or service that are provided in this clustered approach, and how to share the cost and the revenue. Because this, we are serving multiple ULBs, each has got different population, each is generating different kind of waste, how we should share the cost, and also if some revenue is generated, how we can share the revenue. For example, tipping fee. That means if there is a private organization which is there is a regional landfill site and a private organization is depositing garbage over or to this landfill site. So of course they will pay a tipping fee. How to share this particular revenue. So, and the rights of the workers. So this all has to be determined from the state body, because it's a clustered approach. It's a facility provided at a regional scale. So usually what we think is, for biodegradable waste processing where organic matter is involved, it's better to go with a local facility or a local compost plant, right? We don't go for clustered facilities. Whereas for dry waste, inert waste and process rejects from different recycling processes and all this, for this kind of waste where we have to deposit them to a landfill facility, we can go for a regional facility, right? So in that means the landfill serves multiple ULBs, and particularly if we have some sort of a ULB which is common to multiple ULBs, some landfill which is common to multiple ULBs, in that case we require transfer facilities. That means how do I transfer the waste from the ULB to this particular landfill, and also the we have to use container systems to transfer this waste. So transportation system, transfer facilities, this also has to be designed along with regional landfill facilities or regional waste processing facilities. Now once we have done with step 1, the next step is to definitely go for assessment of current situation and gap. So assessment of current situation and gap means, one is to estimate what there is now, which we also term as baseline, and gap analysis, which we have learned earlier, that is what is the difference between the current service or infrastructure and the expected service and infrastructure. So that gap has to be determined. Now this gap is determined not only for infrastructure and facilities or services. This gap has to be estimated for all aspects of municipal solid waste management plan. For example, we have to look into the gaps in the legal and policy framework. That means, is there a need for new rules, new policies and so on? Community participation, existing condition of existing nature, condition of community participation, and what should be done in future. Then the technical part, that is municipal solid waste processing, treatment and disposal, or generation, collection and transportation. So infrastructure, facilities, services, what is the gap in that? Then availability and suitability of land processing and disposal. Are there land available to set up new facilities at all? Current status of the existing landfill sites, or not sanitary landfill but standard dump sites. Environmental concerns, technical aspects or technical gaps, and institutional and financial setup and the gaps in those, right? So these are all the gaps that we need to study. And finally, along with gaps, we also need to do a stakeholder consultation. That means before we even start preparing the draft plan, we have to take into consensus different stakeholder groups, public of that particular urban area, and we have to build a consensus on what we should do. So that is what all these first 3 steps are all about. Now coming to step 2 in detail, as you can see, this particular figure shows the MSW gap analysis for different aspects: administration part, institutional part, the technical part, which is again divided into 2 parts, which is generation, collection, transport, and processing and disposal, and then the policy part, which is laws, rules, and monitoring frameworks, and the financial part, that is adequacy of existing fund, requirement of funds through, in future through grants, user fees, taxes, or by structuring the PPPs and so on. So this is the gap that has to be analyzed. And in case of administration, how much tax is collected from which property, what is the population, demographic characteristics, and in future what will happen, those has to be determined. Institutional aspects include organizational setup, manpower requirements, reporting mechanisms. All these are part of institutional aspect. So, in step 2, the first job is to assess the current status of the baseline. That is, for each of these aspects, what is the current situation? And then subsequently, we have to conduct the gap analysis. So, few things to again summarize: legal requirements, responsibilities of authorities. As per the MSW rules, we can check which are the rules which are followed, which are the rules which are not followed now. Service level benchmarks, how far away we are from the different attributes or the different service level benchmarks that the government has provided. Accordingly, we have to bridge those gaps. Manpower and institutional capacity, deficiencies in the regulatory framework, land use and land availability in future. Service distribution pattern, which is again infrastructure and service design, it's part of that. But how is the service distributed currently? What is is it inclusive? Does it considers all income groups, all zones of the city? Financial deficiencies, stakeholder perception, awareness levels currently in the city, and what amount of new awareness campaign IEC requirements are there for the city. So these are also part of this gap analysis or assessment of current status. And in step 3, like where we have to involve the stakeholders, take their feedback and all, stakeholders' acceptance can be tested for different kind of suggestions that the experts have for developing this particular solid waste management plan in this urban area, willingness to pay for different technologies, different solutions, and also considerations in regards to gender equity. So this is part of step 3, sorry. So now going in details of step 2, I have to create the baseline. So what exactly data that we require, right? So baseline is all about data collection and to understand the situation in that particular urban area. So when we determine the baseline, we should give a list of what sort of data we need to collect in any kind of solid waste management study that we conduct in urban areas. So there are 3 kinds of data. One is ward level data, ward level information on generation and creation of waste. Urban level information on waste management process, because waste management is a urban level process, right? Even though some decentralized approach, we can also some amount of collection and management is done at the local level, but overall it is guided by the ULB, right? So it's a urban level process. And how spatial waste streams is handled and how those are being managed. So to get this kind of data, we have to collect data on different aspects. So these are administrative structure of that particular ULB and the area, the institutional aspects that we discussed, and the natural environment of for that particular urban area. Along with that, we have to have detailed data on the different generation, collection, and transportation processes, and the processing, treatment, and disposal. So we need to have data on the infrastructure, facilities, and services that are provided in that urban area for solid waste management. Finally, financial information and existing monitoring and evaluation mechanism for solid waste management plans. Now, in case of administrative structure and area, you see these are the data that is required. For example, ward and zone maps and boundaries. Zones means the solid waste management zones, right? As we have discussed earlier in administrative structure, we can divide the city into multiple zones. Road and drainage network, land use, areas served by door-to-door collection, areas served by community bin collection, areas which are not served at all. So which are the areas in the city? Decadal population growth rate, number of households, demographic details, building details, which are the bulk generators, industries, markets, monitoring and reporting system, and so on. Now, when we talk about institutional aspects, we have to understand the organizational structure of this particular ULB, the different manpower, their roles and responsibilities, and particularly we have to take careful about regular staff and contractual sanitary workers. because in solid waste, a lot of work is actually given on contracts to different agencies. So this data is difficult to get because private companies don't want to share their data, but we need that data because that helps us to estimate on their efficiency, productivity, and all this. And this data has to be collected for drain cleaning, transportation, processing, disposal for solid waste. Data on sweeper per road length ratio, sweepers per and supervisor ratio, sweeper per population ratio, sweeper per bin ratio, what contracts have been given, who are the stakeholders, the kabadi system in that particular city, and who are the recyclers that are available in that urban area. Then coming to natural environment, we need to understand about the climate, the different parameters of it, the topography and the drainage conditions of this area, because that helps us to determine location of solid waste management facilities and sites, land cover, soil type, groundwater table, surface water sources, and sensitive natural areas in that urban body. So these are the basic data that we collect. And then coming to the detailed data on infrastructure and service characteristics, or infrastructure, facilities, and service characteristics. These are the data which are related with the waste generation, that is total quantity of waste generated and collected for each ward and the overall urban area, waste generation rates, per capita waste collection ward wise and per capita waste collection. So what is generation and collection, and it has to be done for residential households, commercial establishment, institutions, markets, and so on. Seasonal fluctuations in waste generation, how this varies at different seasons, right? That will play a role in the transportation system design maybe. And also the characteristics of waste change in different seasons, so the incineration plant processes has to be adjusted, and many other things needs to be changed. Characteristics of waste generated and collected per ward, like in addition, in normal municipal waste, we have to look into C and D waste, plastic waste, biomedical waste, because these are considered separate. Then regarding the collection process, how much is stored are people storing the waste at source, or they are throwing it away to the bins, or just throwing it away? Waste segregation, how much percentage of people are segregating waste in that urban area? The extent and frequency of waste recycling or recovery, door-to-door collection details, how it is conducted, how many people for how many households, what are the routes those people follow, and so on. Community bins and secondary storage depots, their number, type, location, types of waste collected in those particular bins. Street sweeping coverage and frequency, coverage of slum and informal settlements. So you can see a huge amount of data that needs to be collected to understand what is the current infrastructure and service characteristics of the baseline for that particular urban area. Finally, coming to transportation, similar to collection, of course, we have to do collection via transportation or vehicles. Number and types of vehicles for different stages of collection and transportation, primary, secondary, and tertiary transportation. Logistics and route map for waste transportation, in which route the truck goes, which bins it goes, in which order, because we may have to modify those routes in future. Number of trips and quantity of waste transported in each vehicle in each shift. From here we calculate how much amount of waste has been transported. Number and identification of nuisance spots, which are the areas where people create problem or they don't throw garbage properly. Role of informal sectors, resident welfare associations, self-help groups, role of other stakeholders. So all this needs to be also collected. Now coming to the next part of infrastructure and services, that is municipal solid waste processing, treatment and disposal. This is where we are talking about large-scale infrastructure of waste treatment, processing and disposal facilities and infrastructure, of course. So three kinds of facilities are there. One is refuse facilities which deal with refuse-derived fuel or waste-to-energy plants, incineration facilities, and also waste treatment, processing and disposal facilities, special waste treatment facilities. So these are the different kinds of facilities which has to be set up in an urban area for dealing with different kinds of waste or waste streams. So we need to understand the location and area of these facilities, current and in potential areas in future. Technology used. capacity of these plants, design life of these plants, environmental management system adopted by these plants, the quantity and characteristics of waste treated and processed. Whatever is collected, not everything goes over there. Maybe they do further sorting of waste before that waste is accepted, because they have to accept waste of a certain characteristics, because every industrial process is designed for a certain characteristics. If it varies, then the system will fail. Rejects from each facility and their disposal mechanisms. That means once the processing is done at those particular facilities, what happens with the rejects? That means after incineration, what happens with the ash? So how it is disposed, where it goes. Quantity and products sold from each treatment and processing facility. So we understand that some amount of recycling generates some amount of products and some amount of profit. So that has to be understood. Future land availability for setting up centralized and decentralized facilities. Current capacity, waste disposal, stay, expected life and facilities for landfill. Percentage of MSW treated daily in compost plant. Decentralized, centralized, and including which kind of technique, windrow and vermicomposting. So this is for decentralized facilities. Total quantity of MSW disposed in sanitary landfill and in non-sanitary landfill or dump sites. Then involvement of private sector, NGOs, RWS, SHW, civil bodies, individuals in the MSW process for the entire provision of this processing, treatment and disposal. So these are the huge, this is the data that has to be collected for first preparing the baseline. Now, along with all this infrastructure data, the climate data, the institutional capacity, we also need to understand the baseline financial information, right? So without finance, nothing works. So until unless the project is viable financially, there is no point of preparing a plan. So financial viability is very, very important, and that has to be checked. First of all, we need to understand what is the baseline financial condition, right? So annual revenue and capital expenditure for the municipal solid waste management for that particular urban area. So we need to understand both the direct expenditure of the ULB as well as the indirect expenditure, which includes contracting expenditure. That means I will give a contract, based on that some services will be provided. So that's the indirect expenditure. So I'm not accounting for those things, but it has to be done by that particular agency which is providing that service. Then cost per ton of waste collected, treated, processed and disposed. So what is the cost per ton of waste that we are spending in that ULB? Is there provision for improving that? Are we spending too much money? That means the processes are inefficient. Then user charges for door-to-door collection. What is the demand? Which areas we are collecting? What is the actual percentage of people paying those money? Location and number of households paying user charges. Within a particular zone, which households pay, which households don't. So we have to have records of those. Revenue generation from user charges or percent recovery. That means if I do some amount of recycling at decentralized level and all, some amount of revenue could be generated, and what percentage of total that can be recovered. And similarly, revenue generation from user charges, what percentage of revenue user charges contribute to what percentage of overall revenue. So these are the different things that needs to be understood. Overall revenue generation and resource recovery from centralized facilities and decentralized facilities, so that in future we can determine which is more efficient. Operation and maintenance cost recovery for different services, revenue generation from sale of products from processing and treatment. So that is what we are discussing right now. And finally, we need to look at, along with the baseline financial information, because we have to think about manpower, salaries and all. So organizational structure is very, very important. So we have discussed about organizational structure earlier also, and we will discuss in future as well. And the plan preparation team, in lecture 4 we have covered that what should be the plan preparation team for an urban local body for municipal solid waste management. So that we have discussed. So finally, once this plan preparation team and all this basic data is available, we can start preparing the draft MSWM plan. Why it is called draft? Because after preparing this plan, we have to take it to the stakeholders or to the people, so for their evaluation or for them to first approve it, and then we have to also check for how to implement this particular plan. We have to determine what's the contracting mechanisms going to be, what would be the viability of even conducting those particular services via contract and so on, right? So that's the final steps of this plan preparation. But within this draft plan preparation stage, as you see that over here, you can see that after conduct of the baseline, and we have to determine the gap. We have to determine the gap in the service, right? So once the gap analysis is done, as we are seeing, we were conducting in the previous slides, we have to determine what is the future population for a particular urban area. We have to determine the waste generation quantity and characteristics in future. So we have learnt about how to estimate that, right? So waste that based on GDP and all these other indicators which help us to determine the future rates and all. So sometimes we have to go in much more detail. That means waste generation rates for different population groups even. Then waste generation rates changes over time. So that means how this population group, not only how this varies as per different population groups in that area or different income groups in that area, but how this rate changes over time. So these are the two things that we require. The overall vision and ULB of the ULB and the stakeholder feedback that goes into the preparation of the plan. And finally, financial and technical capability assessment, which helps us in determining what should be the plan in itself, right? So we can go for a short-term plan or a long-term plan. We have discussed short-term plan is for around 5 years, whereas long-term plans could be for 25 years. And we need to determine requirements for collection, door-to-door collection, street sweeping, storage, and transfer. So land requirement, technology and equipment selection, logistic and routing of vehicle and manpower required, environmental, health, and social impacts for this kind of plan. Then IIC campaigns towards minimizing waste generation, improving segregation and decentralized treatment. Selection of appropriate technology and system for waste processing. Which technology to select? This depends on the size of the city, the waste characteristics and generation rate, geographical context, climate, hydrogeology, environmental, social and economic considerations, financial viability or potential for cost recovery for those particular technology or that particular facility or that particular system that you are proposing for this area. So we will learn about all this in detail in the subsequent modules, that what sort of IIC campaigns needs to be conducted for waste minimization. So we will learn that in solid waste generation. We will talk about selection of technologies in subsequent lectures as well. Then we will design this kind of street sweeping system or door-to-door collection system for different urban areas. So we will learn about doing all these things, right, in subsequent lectures. But this is what the draft plan preparation is involved or includes. So this is actually summarized in this particular figure. As you can see that we require future population, then rules, regulation and municipal bylaws that has to be adhered to, community participation, institutional financial structuring, storage and collection and transportation, identification of land, which has to be included in the master plan, and selection process of best available technology. So all this has to be done, which are itself, each of these steps are very large. You have to do a lot of estimates, calculations for each of this. And first, once we conduct that, then we can prepare a draft plan for an urban area. So these are some of the references that you can follow. So to conclude, MSWM planning and design is similar to all other service planning and design. CPHEO has given directions for MSWM plan preparation following a 7-step process. But overall, when you prepare this MSW plan for an urban area, prepare it both as per this guidelines, CPHEO guidelines, as well as what we have taught in service planning and design. Thank you.